Tampa Bay is like no place else.
Wait, you can't recycle the bag? You have to throw it away.
Proper recycling keeps it that way for everyone. Bags tangle in machinery and can bring sorting efforts to a halt.
No bags.
Trash the bags and keep our recycling program moving forward.
No, Mom, look, no plastic bags.
Do your part to keep our recycling bag-free. Trash the tanglers or return them to participating retailers. For more information, visit tampabayrecycles.com.
Good morning, and welcome to your MPO board meeting. We're glad to have everyone here today. Would you please rise for the invocation, the pledge and invocation, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our gracious and Heavenly Father, we're so thankful that you touched us with your loving hands this morning to allow us to see another one of your beautiful days. We're thankful that you allow us to come out today to do the work of this county so we can make it a better place for all of us to live, work, and play. Father, we ask you to put your loving arms around our first responders and those in military uniforms whether on this soil or foreign soil. And when our work is done here today, we ask that you take us back to our homes and find everything safe and sound. These are all blessed. We ask in your righteous and holy name. Amen.
Amen.
We're going to move into the approval of the minutes from the December 4th, 2018 minutes. Motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Mr. Mechanic to approve the December 4th, 2018 minutes. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. Public comment, we have 3 minutes per speaker. 30 minutes is allowed as needed. I have one speaker card this morning, and that is from Chris Vila.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Yibor. So I just wanted to talk a little bit quickly. I'm just going to free loose here on this. I'm looking at the agenda here, and I know that you guys are going to have to be making a very important decision on AFT and their, I guess, on the legal complaint. I just wanted to remind this board is please take note in solidarity with the voters who wanted this to happen. I personally have called a lot of people from different political backgrounds, different ages and so forth, and just many of them want to see changes on the roads to be safer and to have choices to get to places. They know that the infrastructure in our county, in our area, is decades behind. If we want to move forward and seeing a reduction of crashes, if we want to move forward and connecting better and being more competitive as a region and also as a city, and also acknowledging our historic streets, we've got to look into siding with the voters and the big crowd behind everybody here that's sitting on this board. We annually get about 30,000 crashes a year. So if there's any way possible we can start reducing this, that'd be awesome. We know that we're growing. We have approximately a little over $3 billion this past year, 20,000 permits filed in the city of Tampa. We have to support this growth. The only way we can do that is just funding infrastructure. Now I'm going to segue over to another concern of mine with the 5-year work plan. I've sent some comments out in general, and my issue is that we are FDOT's looking to add additional lanes in Seminole Heights. There was some information I found on the plans that are mentioning about express lanes. There was some information on the plan mentioning about the bus toll lanes, and I know that a lot of people here have been questioning those and the effectiveness and what they mean to what the people want. And so for the past couple of years, I think you guys have been heavily saturated that we're opposed against this project. So just take that in consideration when FDOT comes and debriefs about that. But the information's there. So just whenever you get these 5-year work plans, whenever you get this information from the state, look hard at it and find out and do your questions and figure out, why we're still having this dialogue for the past 3 years. Anyways, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to address the board? Seeing none, thank you. Committee reports, online comments, Ms. Torres.
Good morning. Gina Torres, MPO staff. Your committee's elected officers this past month. The CAC chair will continue to be Bill Roberts, Vice Chair Rick Fernandez, Officer at Large Nicole Rice. The Technical Advisory Committee chairs Jeff Sims, Vice Chair Mike Williams, and Officer at Large Amber Dickerson. And the Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Board, Vice Chair Gloria Mills, Officer at Large Craig Forsell. The committee's approved and forwarded to you today the DOT Tentative Work Program and MPO comments. The It's Time Tampa Bay survey results and recommendations on your consent agenda. The Policy Committee discussed this at length, noting that the variations of opinions among demographic segments and geographic subareas of the county, and there was a long discussion on the need for more kinds of highway capacity expansion projects than were asked about in the survey. This is a topic which can be explored later this spring during the traffic modeling and forecasting for the 2045 transportation plan. Also on the consent agenda, the Health and All Policies resolution was forwarded for your approval, and the MPO to sponsor a comprehensive safety audit addressing speed management, focusing on the severe crash corridors in Hillsborough County. The Disadvantage Coordinating Board approved a bylaw amendment to include a membership from the Agency for Persons with Disabilities as required by the Florida Administrative Code. And the Policy Committee also discussed bylaw amendments, adding to establish a code of conduct for the MPO Advisory Committee members, similar to the Planning Commissions and the Florida Senate. So I think that's might be on your status reports today. Other updates received at Tampa Bay Next, Resilient Tampa Bay, Smart Cities. The School Transportation Working Group celebrated its last meeting and members shared successes. The group also discussed their transition to working with the DOT's Community Traffic Safety Team. So that was it on your reports. I'll just go on to the online comments. There were 5 emails received. Robert Sawalish shared students' concerns walking to the USF Medical Campus and needing to cross 2 busy intersections at Bruce B. Downs. He added that the Department of Veterans Affairs have provided $1.4 million to Hillsborough County in August of 2018 for a traffic signal, and the county has set a deadline to complete that project in mid-2021. He was asking if that could be fast-tracked. Mike Lamarca wrote to thank DOT for joining him on an excursion through South County, and they were looking at different projects or concerns he had and focusing on vegetation that overgrows on the shoulders. There was another thank you letter from Eric Goldstein sent to the county for their help in addressing traffic concerns in West Chase. Mauricio Rosas emailed regarding speeding on Highland and the need for the DOT's Heights Mobility Study to identify some timelines for implementation of their recommendations. Bob McKay wrote thanking Beth for an excellent presentation to the chamber. And there were 2 Facebook comments. Robin Miller asked that the CSX rail line be purchased to link USF and downtown, and she was requesting not to fund TB Next, calling it fake BRT highway widening. Michelle Cookson, I have to read some of these comments. Michelle Cookson did send a Facebook post, and I've been asked to read that in full, so I'll do that right now. She wrote regarding agenda item 4, action item B, MPO representation in White versus Hillsborough County et al. I would hope and ask that the MPO to join with Hillsborough County in opposing the spurious claim filed by Stacy White. As the planning body with full authority to represent the citizens and our desire for equitable, multimodal, and safe transportation, it is incumbent that you stand with the people and support the will of the electorate that was made abundantly clear with our majority vote in favor of the All for Transportation tax. As the charter amendment lays out, a particular distribution of funds is specifically allocated to the MPO in support of planning, implementation, support of projects. Section 11.05, distribution of surtax proceeds. The planning and development portion shall be expended by the MPO on planning and development purposes, including data collection, analysis, planning, and grant funding to assist the agencies and the Independent Oversight Committee in carrying out the purpose set forth in Section 11.01. Defend your position of legal authority in helping the community to implement projects that improve our built environment, health, and safety. Surely there are so many instances where your staff of professional planners have wanted so badly to implement better transportation, they now have the fiscal means to make that a reality. This lawsuit is disingenuous. We must fight this nonsense, get it over and quickly, and signal the will of the people will not be denied or ignored. Thank you. Those were all of your online comments. Thanks.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Move to the consent agenda. Is there any question on the consent agenda? If not, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Maniscalco, second by Commissioner Kemp. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed likewise, motion is adopted. Action items, FDOT tentative work program and MPO comments. Who's doing that? Okay.
Good morning, board members. There's a packet right there in front of you. And what this document is the complete listing of projects in the FDOT tentative work program. I'm going to be giving you a presentation, however, on what we call the highlights, which are just the changes to the document that have occurred since the last time we presented to you last fall. So the tentative work program that we're working on right now is for fiscal years 2020 to 2024, and it covers project phases and activities scheduled from July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2024. Year one becomes part of the state's proposed budget package that is then reviewed and approved by the legislature and the governor. And years 2 through 5 are commitments that we make to the public for production and financial planning purposes. This document includes FDOT managed projects as well as locally managed projects with FDOT involvement. However, it does not include every project that might be in a CIP or a local work program. The current adopted work program that we're working from now is FY19 to FY23. It's shown up on the screen. Every year on June 30th, that first year drops off. That fiscal year 19 goes away, and we add the new fifth year, which in this case is 2024, and this is the point that we're at right now where this is tentative. After the governor signs the work program, it's included, the first year becomes part of the budget, and the department has the authority to spend the funds in year one, and the last 4 years are considered adopted. When we update the work program, our priorities are first to preserve the projects that we have already programmed and update cost estimates, and then after doing that, we look to add new projects and phases to the program based upon this board's priorities as well as the priorities of the TMA, T-BARDA, and the department's strategic intermodal system. So again, this presentation will include new projects not previously included, and it will include PD&E, design or preliminary engineering, right-of-way, construction, design-build projects, as well as grants. So starting off with planning, metropolitan transportation planning funds were added in 2024. Planning model surveys for the regional travel model were added in 2024 as well. Under preserving the system, bus replacements for HART were added in 2024, as well as bus stop capital repairs. Also under preserve the system, the Platte Street Bridge over the Hillsborough River, a bridge replacement feasibility study. Also a similar study for the Columbus Drive Bridge over the Hillsborough River. Yes, sir?
May I just ask, didn't we just do those two bridges?
Yes, sir.
Both of them?
Yes, sir.
So why are we looking at replacing them?
These are locally requested projects, and I believe these were requested by Hillsborough County. Beth, did you have any more information on that?
No,
Oh, no.
I mean,
Oh, sorry.
I don't.
I was at the ribbon cutting for the Platte Street Bridge, so that's not a very long life.
Yeah,
If
'cause
I might. So we received a letter last spring from Hillsborough County with a list of funding requests, as well as from the other local governments. Hillsborough County staff indicated that the repairs that have been done to the bridges have a limited lifespan, and there's going to need to be a more enduring investment in these bridges that might make it worthwhile to look at possibly replacing them and rebuilding them with a historic character. So based on that request, we did include this in our priority list last summer, and so the DOT is simply responding to the priority list.
So we repair the bridges, but it's not good enough, so we're going to tear them down and build them again. So.
Well, and also they're clearly not in that bad of a shape if it's 5 years before the study's even being commissioned. But it does sort of beg the question of how, I mean, this only happened like 5 years ago that all that work was done on Platte, and Columbus was even more recent.
So let's say that the repairs have a 15-year lifespan. It's been 5 years. It'll be 5 years before there's a feasibility study. Then we'll have to figure out what exactly are the repairs, what do they cost, and figure out how to fund them. So it is, yeah.
Another 15 years.
We do long-range planning here.
A billion here, a billion there.
Sorry, I can ask you a question. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Under Preserve the System, 3 resurfacing projects, one on Sun City Center, one on Dale Mabry, and one on State Road 60, Brandon Boulevard. Design was added in 2020 and construction in 2022. 3 more resurfacing projects, one on State Road 60 as well, and then 2 on US 301. Again, design in 2022, construction in 2024. And one more on on State Road 39, Paul Buckman, from Knights Griffin to the Pasco County line, design in 2022, construction in 2024. Under drainage improvements, Del Mabry from Neptune to Henderson, construction was deferred from 2022 to 2023. Design is still funded and underway, however. Martin Luther King from McGill to Habana, design was added in 2020 and construction in 2022, as well as State Road 60 at Fish Creek Trail Bridge, construction was added in 2020. Under reducing crashes and vulnerability, Vision Zero corridor studies were added in 2024. And intersection improvements for Brandon Boulevard, construction for Valrico Road was added in 21. And then for Lakewood, Kings, Parsons, and Mount Carmel, construction was added in 2022. And for St. Cloud, construction was added in 2024. North Tampa Street and North Florida Avenue from Tyler Street to Martin Luther King. These are improvements generated by the Heights Mobility Study. Design in 2020, construction in 2024. And then Nebraska Avenue from Kennedy Boulevard to Bush Boulevard. This is a sidewalk gap project and pedestrian crossing project. Design in 2022, construction in 2024. Also under reduced crashes and vulnerability, this is the next phase of that same project, Florida Avenue, Highland Avenue from Martin Luther King to Waters, and then Highland Avenue from Violet to Hillsborough. Design was added in 2022. Ola Avenue and Central Avenue Bike Boulevard projects. Design for Ola was added in 2021, construction in 23, and for Central, design in 2022, construction in 2024. East Bush Boulevard, new pedestrian crossings at Brooks Street, 12th Street, 19th Street, and Pawnee Avenue. Design was added in 2020, right-of-way in 2021, and construction in 2022. Green Spine Cycle Track, Phase 3B, from 7th Avenue to 13th Street. Construction was added in 2024. Sidewalk gaps on El Prado. The first phase, design was added in 21, construction in 23, and then the second phase, design was added in 22, construction was added in 24. Doyle Carlton Drive at Laurel Street, a new roundabout, construction was added in 2024. Sulphur Springs K-8 Safe Routes to School project, design was added in 2020, construction was added in 2023. And then Florabraska Complete Street from Tampa to Nebraska, construction was deferred from 2019 to 2021. New traffic signals on Gibsonton Drive at Fern Hill, Platt Street at Fremont, and then Cleveland Street at Rome. Construction for all 3 were added in 2022. Additional traffic signals along Fowler, right-of-way was dropped for these 3, but the project is still funded to move forward for construction. And then Del Mabry at El Prado and Interbay, right-of-way was also dropped, but the same situation, it's still funded for construction. We just don't need the right-of-way acquisition like we thought we did. Kennedy at West Shore, design was added in 2023. Nebraska at Twiggs, construction was added, or it was advanced to 2020 from 2021. Under Managed Congestion, Integrated Corridor Management Projects, these are smart technology projects along arterials. State Road 60 Kennedy Boulevard from Memorial to Ashley. Design was added in 22 and construction in 24. Martin Luther King from Del Mabry to I-275. Design build project was added in 2023. And then Florida and Tampa from Kennedy to Bears. Design build was added in 2024. Under Managed Congestion, I-75 at Gibsonton. Add turn lanes. Construction was added in 2024. And then 3 interchanges along I-4. Design was added in 2022 and construction in 2024. I-4 additional interchanges at Branch Forbes and Mango. Design was added in 2022 and then construction also in 2024. Intersection improvements for West Shore at Gandy. Construction was advanced from 2020 to 2019. Martin Luther King at 50th Street. Construction was advanced from 2023 to 2019. And then US 301 at Bloomingdale was added for construction in 2021. The Green Artery segments D and E, construction was added in 2020. The Tampa Bypass Canal Trail, the design was deferred from 2020 to 2022. I-275 from the Howard Franklin Bridge to Rhea Street. This is the connection to the Howard Franklin Bridge Trail. Construction was added in 2024. The Courtney Campbell Causeway, there's a sidewalk gap that's being filled on the north side of the causeway. Design was added in 21, construction in 22. Dale Mabry from Fletcher to Van Dyke. Construction was added in 2022. Under major investments for economic growth, I-275 at State Road 60 interchange. This is the Tampa Bay Next Section 4. Right-of-way for this project has been fully funded in the work program from 2021 through 2024. I-4 from the Solomon Connector to Branch Forbes Road. This is the Section 8 Tampa Bay Next project. Construction for this project was removed from the work program. I-275 from Martin Luther King to Hillsborough. This is the additional 4th lane in each direction. This is Interstate Modernization Section 7. Construction was advanced from 2024 to 2023. And then I-275 from I-4 to MLK. This is an operational improvement to tie in to that Section 7 project, those existing lanes. Construction was added in 2023. I-275 from Willow to MLK. And then I-4 from I-275 to the Solomon Connector. This is the downtown interchange project. Design for this project was dropped. And then I-275 from Lois to Willow. This is the Interstate Modernization Section 5. Funding for this project was removed from the work program. I-75 at Big Bend from Covington to Simmons. This is a short section of widening of Big Bend as well as the reconstruction of the interchange. This project will be for construction in 2022, and it will be a partial payback from FDOT to Hillsborough County to build that sooner than what was scheduled. Additional new road construction, Apollo Beach Extension from US 41 to Paseo Almar. Construction was advanced from 2021 to 2020. And then I-75, I-275, this is a collector distributor road up around the Pasco County line that will tie into the new diverging diamond interchange at State Road 56. Design was deferred from 2021 to 2022. And that is it with my updates on projects, but the total dollar amount for the packet in front of you is about $1.6 billion over 5 years, investment in Hillsborough County. And the public hearing on this document was held from December 17th through the 21st in an online format. December 20th, we held a work program open house at our office, and December 31st, the public comments were all due to FDOT. January 28th is when we ask MPO objections or comments to be submitted by so that we can submit them up with our tentative work program package to the legislature and to the administration for review, and it will be effective July 1 of 2019. And with that, thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. Just a couple of quick inquiries, and I think I wanted to make sure this is clear for the record. In this plan, you've got several important things. Preserving the system, which usually requires resurfacing and restoration as well as rehabilitation, obviously. And then ultimately, you've got in the areas of managing congestion. I just want to make sure that we don't miss an opportunity to include transit corridors for the increased opportunity to invest in HART's transit system. In the past, I've seen roads that have been resurfaced without necessarily adding a safety feature that is critical to the safety of not only our pedestrians, but also opening up the corridor for allowing for transit to travel through where it becomes a preference to travel rather than travel on our roads in a single occupancy vehicle. So in any of the construction projects, as well as any of the PD&Es, I would ask that focus and coordination with HART's expansion of their transit system be considered in any projects that are in the plan.
Thank you. Just for reference, this document was developed prior to, obviously, to November, so there are changes that we are going to be coordinating with the local governments and with the transit agencies, especially within the outer years of the program where projects are probably going to be shifted around and moved. So,
okay. And
yes.
One other question. Where are my traffic lights on Florida Avenue at Wilder and Idlewild?
So this this only includes, outer year, from 2020 to 2024, and so the projects, obviously, that are in 2019 aren't in this book. So those were presented last year, and those will be done before 2020. So.
Okay, thank you. The reason I ask is that we need to lower the speeds all through our urban corridors, and I know we're doing a study soon on safety and speeds, but it's very clear that we have a problem with speeds specifically inside of Tampa, but also in some areas in Brandon and Riverview, Fishhawk, and those areas where reduction of speed would add safety until we can figure out what the results of our study actually says. So I highly recommend doing that across the board. So thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognized.
Thank you. I just have a couple of quick questions, too. With the Tampa Bypass Canal, it's deferred, and why is that?
The PD&E is underway, so that was funded last cycle, and so the county is moving ahead with that. But the schedule for the design was too quick, so the PD&E won't be done by the time the design funding was programmed, so we had to move it out to align better. We also have to show funding for the next phase of the project to get the PD&E approved, and so we have to have design in there somewhere, but it's kind of a placeholder for now.
I've also kind of been tracking 41 with the bridge to bypass the CSX tracks, and that's not on there, right? I don't think
it was a previous project, so it wasn't a change, but it is in the book already.
Oh, okay. Okay, I think I missed that. And then my final thing is just because it's been addressed a lot of times, including public comment this morning, was in terms of I-275 north of downtown up, just to be clear, this isn't adding any roadway, but using the roadway that's already in place? For which one, or for both, I'm assuming? Because Well, any of the, from I-275 north of downtown to
okay.
Fowler, let's say, or going north.
Right. So for what's programmed now is simply from the downtown interchange up to the Hillsborough Avenue exit. In that section, there is no right-of-way expansion. There are some areas where, like, the physical footprint is going to shift and change, obviously, but the vast majority of the work is that inside shoulder area that's already existing. It's taking some of that, and we actually have to rebuild some of it because it's not full depth, so it can't hold cars, so they have to reconstruct some of it on the inside, but there will not be any outward, outside of the right-of-way lines expansion with these. For the Section 7, PD&E, that will be coming out for public hearing here in the spring. It goes all the way to Bears, and there is some right-of-way at Bears for ponds, but there's nothing in the historic district or anything south of the river that would be a right-of-way acquisition or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Commissioner Smith, you recognized.
And within that same section, the additional capacity you're adding is, if we approve this today, are we approving toll lanes in that section?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Coyne, you recognize?
One question. I noticed you deferred stormwater work on Dale Mabry, Henderson, and Neptune, and the city is already in the midst of a stormwater upgrade there. Why the reason? What's the reason for the deferral?
We are coordinating very closely with them, and this is actually, I'm sure you've seen presentations from city staff on it. This is what they're going to refer to as like the DOT contribution to their program. So it's additional work than what was anticipated, additional design work. After actually, boring it down there and looking at stuff, they actually have to do more than they thought. And so it's going to take a little bit longer to actually finish the design and start construction. So this is just an adjustment in that schedule. It's not going to be like a whole other year, but it was enough to bump it out a fiscal year. So you're seeing the shift show up there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
MPO representation in the White versus Hillsborough County, Mr. Clark.
And good morning, board members. And if I may, before we had spoken about this, I'm contracting of counsel to a law firm that's involved in this litigation. Therefore, I will have to abstain, and we had just talked about that in this particular vote. So just FYI. Should I stay here or go outside? I'm fine with staying here.
I don't think there's any reason you can't stay.
Just making sure.
Good morning, board members. This is related to the Stacy White versus Hillsborough County et al. Lawsuit. This lawsuit was filed, as most of you know, really almost immediately before our last board meeting. However, at the time, really most of us only knew about it from the newspaper articles. The newspaper never mentioned that there were in fact 10 defendants and that the MPO is one of them. So we took no decision at that time as far as what position to take, legal representation, and other factors. Hillsborough County our office is conflicting out of representation of the county based on the fact that it's the county commissioner that's the plaintiff, and the county is being represented by Attorney Alan Zimmett of Bryant Miller Olive. What I'm asking the board to do is to discuss two primary positions today. One is legal representation, and the second is what position does the MPO board want to take vis-a-vis the lawsuit. There are, and just for purposes of representation, let me start by saying that this initially seemed like it was going to be more of an urgent circumstance because as of the date that the lawsuit was filed, in order to file an answer on time, we would have had to file an answer before today's meeting. So we were starting to work on how to do that, which, we would have been able to get that done, but in the end, it wasn't necessary because the plaintiff's attorney agreed to extend the MPO's time to answer until later this week on Friday the 11th. Also, several other defendants wanted the same extension to this Friday, so ultimately we had the opportunity to come back to the full board for representation. In our discussions during that more urgent period, though, the attorney for the county, Alan Zimmett, had discussed with us and with Ms. Alden the idea of representing the MPO, and since if this board takes the same position of the county, which is to oppose the lawsuit, to answer the complaint with general denials to the arguments of the plaintiff, if it's the same position, then Alan Zimmett could actually represent the MPO as well. It wouldn't cause him to have to do any extra work, and he wouldn't actually charge the MPO anything. However, there are other positions that the MPO might take. For instance, a couple of the defendants, I believe the tax collector, property appraiser, and I believe the Department of Revenue, are answering the complaint by taking no position on the plaintiff's complaint and abiding by any ruling of the court, which is effectively remaining neutral as to the outcome. There's discussion, at least of one or two of the defendants, of filing a motion to dismiss to effectively remove themselves from the lawsuit. But most of the defendants at this time, obviously the county, a couple of the cities, Hart, are answering the complaint with general denials. So I can take any questions you might have, and our litigation chief, Rob Brazel, is also here to answer any questions about the lawsuit. So the two things that I think it'd be ideal to have a vote on regards who should represent the MPO and what position this board wants to take in terms of the lawsuit.
Councilman Coyne, you recognize.
So, just a couple of questions. Are there other entities like the MPO that have retained separate counsel in this matter?
Yes, there's not common representation for all the defendants. The county is represented by Alan Zimmett. Hart has its own counsel, David Smith. The city of Tampa has its own attorney. So each of the entities has their own lawyer. At this point, I'm not aware of any of the defendants who are sharing counsel. Go ahead.
And in a shared counsel arrangement, would we be subsumed by the county, or would we be a partner with the county in the representation?
Well, the county has already filed its answer with its general denials. I don't know. It depends, I guess, how you define subsumed. I mean, the MPO is its own defendant, but to the extent that its position is consistent with the county's, as in denying the allegations and opposing the complaint, as long as those are consistent. Now, what would happen is if at any point an inconsistency developed between the counties and the MPO's positions, then Alan Zimmett would conflict out and only represent the county, and the MPO could then get its own lawyer if it so desired.
So I really think as a practical matter, we need to hear from the commissioners about what I think the chances are of that happening. Because if there's any chance of that happening, I think we probably need our own representation.
I might suggest, board members, if a conflict were to arise and that was to happen, I think in order to address the exigency of it, the board could vote to delegate to the MPO chair and the director to pull in counsel to basically take the place of Mr. Zimmett, if the board decides to go with Mr. Zimmett this morning. So that because of the defendants, I believe our board probably meets the least, so we're talking about once a month, so it doesn't give you a lot of time to adapt to changes. Although based on the dates of the hearings that have been set so far, I think one is in mid-March and there's another one early May. So you actually have several board meetings before you actually get to hearings on any of these things.
Mr. Mechanic, regular.
Could I just comment on that last comment?
Sure.
And, there are also discussions going on among council, however, so decisions could be required to be made long before the next scheduled hearing. So I think Mr. Cohen's concern sort of could come up sooner rather than later. I'm not saying there will be a problem, but I think we do need to understand the position of the county, and I think the MPO also needs to decide what its position is going to be.
Yeah, first and foremost, this board needs to decide what its position is. You know, the county has already made a decision that we oppose the lawsuit. If this board decides to do that, the opportunity presents itself, like Mr. Cameron Clark has said, that we could join in with the firm that the county has. If there's any, I don't know what word to use, I only play a lawyer on TV. If there's any division between what the thoughts may be at one point, then I guess we could then pull ourselves out and hire our own attorney. I would suggest if this board decides to oppose the lawsuit, that we join in with the county's attorneys. That's my recommendation. That's just me at this point. So I think one thing we need to do right now as a board is decide if we're going to oppose the lawsuit.
Well, I certainly would be in favor of opposing.
Someone makes a motion then.
I'll make a motion that we oppose the lawsuit in the greatest extent reasonably possible.
Second.
There's a motion that we oppose the lawsuit. You didn't say anything about joining the county's attorneys in your motion, did you?
Well, can we talk about that
All right,
second?
Okay, there's a motion and a second to oppose the lawsuit by Mr. Mechanic, second by Councilman Cohen. Is there any questions? Are there any questions? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise, motion is adopted. Now, where,
Yes.
yeah, Councilman Vieira abstained. For the record, make sure you say that. Now we're in the discussion of where do we stand as far as general counsel goes for representing the MPO.
Question?
Commissioner Overman.
I'm not sure that I would find that there would be a discrepancy between the county's position and the MPO's position, but I think we need to talk about that. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not sure, where in the legal process it would arise.
Here's my question. I just want us to be as vigorous as possible in our opposition, and if we feel as a board that we can get a vigorous representation by joining forces with the county, then fine with that. If we anticipate that there's going to be some difference of opinion between us, I just think this would be the time to bring up whatever concerns there are. That's all.
Just in the, to answer why I have a question about it, is that in the Hart's response and some of the update that we've gotten, those of us that are on Hart, there's conversations about how, negotiations and interlocal agreement plays a part in that process. So that's where my question goes. In the process of finding solutions, the interlocal agreement seems to be a piece of the complaint. And so I'm just trying to get my handle on, in the process of coming up with solutions to solve this, would we need to address maybe any conflicts the MPO might have versus the board? And that's my only concern, is how would we address that if that were to arise?
Board members, I could state, as part of his oath, if a conflict was to arise between two clients of Mr. Zimmett, he would have to withdraw. So essentially, it's not like the MPO board would have to determine that there was a conflict or that the BOCC would. Essentially, if there's a conflict that arises between their positions where they start to diverge, then Mr. Zimmett would have to withdraw. At that point, the MPO would get its own counsel. And my thought would be that if the board decided to go with Mr. Zimmett, to, as part of that motion, that if a conflict was to arise that would necessitate the MPO board getting its own attorney, to delegate to the MPO chair the ability to, sign a legal services agreement with another attorney and to have that brought back to the full board for ratification, just because our meetings are far enough apart that it allows for a quick adjustment if that was needed.
Thank you. It helps me understand it.
Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Yes, I just want to point out that the MPO only gets 1% of the tax money, and it would be a shame to be spending that on legal representation if we don't need to. So that's a consideration. And I'm not an attorney either, but having read what our county attorney is doing and talked to our county attorney as well as the Hart defense, we are mounting a very vigorous defense point by point, and so I would hope that we can stick with that as until the attorney determines a conflict has arisen.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
I just want to move that we do so. I think this is a good way to manage this, and we can deal with a conflict should that arise. So I make that motion.
Second.
What was your motion again?
My motion is that we join with the county or be represented by the county. I also am concerned about resources, and it doesn't make sense to me to expend other resources unless we do have a conflict. So that's my motion, that we have the county representation, and should a conflict arise, then the attorney will conflict out, and we can deal with that at that time.
There was a motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Commissioner Smith. Mr. Mechanic, you recognize.
I support the motion, but I wanted to get clarification. Mr. Zimmett's representation of the MPO would, by necessity, treat this board as a client, and therefore Mr. Zimmett would then be briefing our chairman as if he was, not as if, as a client in this matter. So as discussions evolve, Mr. Miller would be part of a client discussion in terms of decisions that whether to go in this direction or another direction. I wasn't very articulate, but I'm trying to get to the point of saying that Mr. Miller, as our chairman, would be treated as a client separate from the county as being a client, for purposes of briefing and decision-making.
Yes, the MPO would be a client, yes.
And I, as chairman of the county commission, also met with him on the county commission side.
Okay, so
I'll
it makes it convenient. That's right.
Yeah, what I was actually going to say is that I think ultimately, unfortunately or fortunately, the responsibility will fall on you, because you're basically going to be there as representing two separate clients. And I think I will be in support of the motion. I guess that the only issue is if you feel at some point that there's a conflict between the county's position and the MPO, it would be necessary for us to be made aware of that.
Oh, you will be. You will be.
Excellent, thank you.
And
And board members, if the idea appealed to you, as part of the motion, in case a conflict arose, would you want to delegate to the chair the ability to bring in an attorney quickly and then have you ratify that decision subsequently?
Do we need a motion to that effect?
I didn't know if we made that part of the same motion, or if you just wanted to, if you just
Someone
choosing
make an
Mr.
amendment to that motion with,
I'll make that amendment.
there's an amendment by Councilman Cohen, second by
I'll second.
Commissioner Overman and Commissioner Kemp to the motion. Is there discussion on the amendment to the motion? Do you understand the amendment to the motion?
Could you restate the amendment?
State the amendment to the motion.
Yes, just that in case a conflict arose between the MPO and the county, and Mr. Zimmett had to conflict off representation of the MPO, it would allow the MPO chair to quickly bring in new counsel, and then that could be brought back and ratified by the full board at its next meeting.
Any discussion on the amendments of the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendments to the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise, motion is adopted. Now we're back on the amended motion. That's right. Councilman Vero abstains.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Let me be known that, I've been in this business for a long time. I have never been sued by one of my colleagues. Never. So all of you elected officials from the county, this is unprecedented area. I just don't, anyway, we're collecting taxpayers' dollars to spend taxpayer dollars to defend taxpayers' decision. It's just stupid to me. Anyway.
You're not alone.
I just had to get that out there. Put that on the record, too. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let them know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise, motion is adopted. Thank you.
With Lennox.
You're abstained. All right. Status reports, Smart City Initiatives.
Morning, Board. Happy New Year. My name is Vic Bide with the City of Tampa's Smart Mobility Division. I also chair the MPO's ITS Committee, and I'm going to be talking about smart cities briefly today. So smart cities is a catch-all term, buzzword, if you will, nowadays. To me, what it simply means is using the evolution of technology to improve our quality of life. From a transportation and particularly planning context, what it means is historically we've done a lot of our planning efforts in a static manner. We've used a lot of static data to inform what we do 5 years, 10 years, 15 years out. Technology now allows us to utilize real-time data. And there are some real benefits of using real-time data to inform our decisions, both on the operational and planning horizons. The other thing that's happened with changes in technology is where our rights of way were historically brick and mortar, then they became electrical, they're now digital. They produce a lot of data, as you've seen through some of the work program projects and our coordination with FDOT and other partners. And what this data does is allows us to manage our rights of way better in the context of changing mobility demands. So I'll give you an example of the Taylor Swift concert at Raymond James Stadium. Historically, a sold-out concert had about 9,000 to 10,000 parking spaces needed to facilitate transportation. This concert only sold about 5,500. The rest of the demand was rideshare, Uber and Lyft. So our focus now needs to move. Actually, it doesn't need to move. We've got to walk and chew gum at the same time. We've got to look at parking, but also rideshare. What's happening at our curbside? That's where your real-time data comes in. How do we manage on-street parking during certain times of day, drop-offs and pickups for ride shares during other times of day, and maybe loading and offloading while adding bike lanes, while making pedestrian safety a key priority and Vision Zero elements a key priority of what we do. And technology is going to help. So I think I've beat that to death. We're all aware of our transportation challenges with congestion, funding. Of course, there's some reason for optimism around the funding part, land use, and safety, especially safety. We absolutely need to move the needle on safety. So my presentation, I'm going to talk about the context in which a smart Tampa Bay or smart Hillsborough County exists, the framework that may be needed to create a smart cities program for the entire region and how you fit into this. And some of the projects that we're working on, a lot of them are pilots. We're pushing the industry and pushing possibilities to see how we can address some of these challenges. And let me reiterate, our challenges are safety, mobility, and sustainability. That's what we're targeting. By far, our context is dominated by urbanization, not just to our downtown areas and the urban core between the airport and downtown, but if you look at Brandon and other suburbs, they now have urban problems, not suburban problems. And so that's a dominant context. Demographics as well. We're seeing a lot of people move to our area from the Northeast and the West Coast and so on and so forth. The younger folks are moving in for job opportunities. Boomers, many of them empty nesters, want to downsize their lives. They want to drive lesser. Both of these generations, and I'm Gen X, we're kind of that little sliver in the middle. But both of these generations participate in the sharing economy. This is an important concept because the central ethos of the sharing economy, and you see it with Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, is that access is more important than ownership. This is a big shift from where we have been moving forward with our mindset towards planning, towards operations, and so on. And what this means is there's going to be a lot of services provided on the right-of-way where we were the sole mandated bodies to provide services through traffic management and such. Climate change is a key consideration as well, be it sea level rise or even today's problems with climate change, which is short, intense storms that really test our stormwater systems. And we know what to do after this flooding occurs. We know what the hotspots are. We can use technology to identify it and take proactive measures in the short term and plan better in the long term. And then safety and a changing landscape of technology. This technology is in the form of sensors. That's our smartphones, connected devices, fridges, Nest, you name it. You can turn your lights on and off from here in your house. What that means is that same data may be utilized for other things as well, other use cases. It's not very clear. The industry is usually focused on delivering one solution. Our call is to be part of the innovation process as public agencies and inform the industry in a direction that benefits our mandates as well. Faster communications, processors, artificial intelligence algorithms allow all this data to be processed better, to provide better services. There's a lot of potential there. Shared mobility services is going to change the way we move from point A to point B. And battery and solar technology, which is almost following Moore's law and getting more and more efficient every year, is going to distribute our energy systems from centralized to decentralized sources. And that's going to impact our future as well. So just one concept I want to dwell on is mobility as a service. The significant investments being made. Most recently, Ford purchased some rideshare and scooter companies. Uber's done the same. Lyft just purchased a scooter company. So you're seeing this bundling of different modes. E-scooters is another thing. How would we plan for that? They didn't exist 2 years ago, and we make 20, 25-year plans sometimes. But the concept of mobility as a service is basically we would subscribe to moving from point A to point B on a monthly basis the way we consume cellular services or internet and so on and so forth. And it would be a bundle of long and short trips. The short trips could be scooters, bike share. The longer trips could be transit, ride share, and so on and so forth. Of course, the key factor here is the cost per mile for this service to be a reality. That is what will tip the scales. We're moving towards this. It's anyone's guess as to when that will happen, but the potential for it to be half of that compared to owning a vehicle is very real according to many estimates. This will be user-focused. This will create safer roads, for sure, especially through automation. We will be able to reduce accidents. It may make the roadways more efficient and greener because of battery and solar. It will not solve congestion, and we'll look into that. Transit or high-capacity modes of travel will solve our basic physics problem, which is right now we're trying to shove 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag, and that 10 pounds is going to be 12, 13, 14 down the road. But you're all aware of this. So, in terms of developing a framework, this is just something that at the city we've learned through the USDOT Smart City Challenge, and this is what we propose. Develop a clear benefits narrative, and the benefits narrative has to be simple so that leaders like you can coalesce the community around this idea, and it serves us practitioners as a problem statement. Think of persons with disabilities should be able to walk through our downtown comfortably. That would be an acceptable benefits narrative. Everyone can understand that, and we can convert it into our technical problems as needed. Leverage generalists, so people from all walks of lives. We tend to have technical people making decisions about things that everyone else utilizes. So I'll just leave that at that. Commit to public-private partnerships. Public-private partnerships have a history of not necessarily producing the best results, but I would posit that we may not have a choice. With so much technology being introduced into our roadways and our transportation systems, we cannot keep up with technology. We're not good at that. The private sector is better at it. What we can do is influence rulemaking. What we can do is engage, get there before they are, in order to define what services they can provide and how they can provide these services. I'll give an example. I mentioned special events. Last year, 2018, was the first year we started working with Uber and Lyft to expand their geofences around the arena and the stadium because, of course, as citizens, we're creative. After a special event, we walk 2 streets from the event and order a Lyft so that people aren't going to the Lyft queue and you have to wait lesser, but that creates more congestion. These operations will be more automated. They will be more real-time. And that's why we need to have the private sector at the table working with us and engaged. Adopt a city as a lab approach. This is something Mayor Buckhorn has also supported in the past. And what it means is take an agile approach, deploy pilots, understand what the possibilities are, and if it works, then grow it by all means, and use that to inform planning decisions beyond just well-known methodologies. Address vulnerable communities. I think that is going to be a challenge with technology as it advances, that vulnerable communities might be left behind. But that's where we have to do things like, for example, the city is working on an e-scooters pilot. And one of our conditions is that the unbanked should be able to use e-scooters, and they should be able to purchase rides in an offline manner. So that's just an example. And tackle big needs first because the community just gets more buy-in that way. So our goals are common, competitive advantage. Communities that do these type of things attract talent, and people will move here because we are an advanced community and not just because our cost of living is lower. Improves quality of life, safety certainly, user-focused services. Technology enables a two-way conversation between the community and government services in real time. What it basically means is the wishes of the community are listened to and answered in real time. And we're going to look at one project where that's going to be a possibility. Congestion mitigation, vulnerable communities, resiliency. We looked at storms and Hurricane Irma, and we'll look at that example. And port and airport operations and security, because these are key drivers for our economy locally for the region. So earlier this year, we started the Tampa Bay Smart Cities Alliance. This is a public-private academic alliance of the University of South Florida, FDOT. All the municipalities in the region are welcome. Most of them are on it, including all the 3 counties, Pinellas, Pasco, and Hillsborough. And the goal is simple. We want to streamline, or we want to coordinate our technology deployments to have a unified user experience. Whether you're a visitor or you're a resident of our region, you shouldn't need 2 different parking apps. You shouldn't have to use 2 different systems if you're in Pasco County or Pinellas County or downtown Tampa or downtown St. Pete. We are looking at 3 focus areas initially. Their mobility as a service, we looked at that. A regional data platform, a single source of truth, if you will. All our municipalities collect data individually and separately, as do all the MPOs. And we don't have a single platform for reference. And that single platform will create efficiencies, it'll show cohesion, but it also helps developers who might have to do, counts when these counts exist, and now you're going back and forth. This is just a simple example, but a single source of truth is becoming more and more important. USF and Tampa signed an MOU to focus on smart cities. We started a smart mobility lab and donated some equipment. And we became part of a national dialogue through the Metro Lab Network. This is a city-university collaborative. All major cities are on this globally, actually. And what it does is it allows us to learn from other communities and what they're doing, and then coordinate with the bright minds at the universities to, one, help us develop new solutions, but also create the talent and retain the talent within the region. So that was the goal with that. Our partners, like I said, a myriad of public and private partners. Happy to share this later if you like. I'm going to look at some projects, and this is thanks to FDOT, the ATMS, Advanced Traffic Management Systems project at the city. What this does, think of this as us building an iPad region-wide so that we can run smart city apps on top of. Without the communications, without the smarter control equipment, without the sensors, we won't be able to have ears on the ground, communicate this data, or process it in our traffic management center. This is what that project does. Some of the highlights of this project is it will upgrade control equipment at all traffic signals. It'll allow us to deploy more cameras that not just do video, but analytics. So to date, if you visit our traffic management center co-located with Thea, we've got all these videos. But that video is looking at something, and computers can now make sense of that something and convert it into data that can be used for planning and operations. It's called video analytics. And it will expand our connected vehicle deployment downtown, which Thea had started, and complete the downtown. And we may become the first downtown that is CV ready in the nation as a result of this. So thank you, FDOT. We have a pilot project. It's called the Smart Paint Project. Again, this is in coordination with Ohio State University. Intelligent Material that owns the IP on this, HART and the Tampa Lighthouse for the Blind. These are our partners. The concept is simple. We have crosswalks. If those crosswalks had material that could be sensed by smart canes that blind people could use, it would keep them in the crosswalk. Some of our intersections are very large, and if you can imagine, if a pedestrian is not aligned exactly along the crosswalk, from point A, point B might be in the middle of the intersection or at a place where you cannot safely get on. And that's why we've collaborated with the Lighthouse for the Blind, Procurement for the smart paint is going on right now, and we're going to test in 2 locations in South Tampa. There are other applications of this as well. Think of the airport or a convention center or crowded spaces for navigation. But also think about connected and automated vehicles and the challenges they have with positioning. GPSs can be inaccurate, especially over cellular networks. I won't get technical, but if you can embed this information in the paint, it can guide vehicles. And the more accurate they know where they are, the better safety they can deliver to other roadway users. We're doing a pilot project again for solar to power traffic signals. Our pilot location is going to be Morgan and Whiting, and we're looking at solar panels that mount on sidewalks. Why sidewalks? Because that's existing real estate that are walkable, bikeable, so they have a friction course. And we can't really put them on poles because of high winds and things like that. So unique conditions to Florida. But again, the use case here is pretty strong. Think Hurricane Irma, a floodless storm, and yet we didn't have power for 5 days. That ground the economy to a halt. Large intersections like 275 and Dale Mabry, we had 3 officers doing nothing but traffic control. We're moving generators around. The benefit for the cost will pay for itself for this type of a project. And we are pushing the industry on that because a product doesn't necessarily exist, but we're going to try an experimental product. If it works, I think it'll be great for our region and for all coastal cities in the US, the world for that matter. We're working with TECO on smart streetlights. A lot of cities are doing smart streetlights. Still to be seen how useful sensors on them will be, but one thing is for sure, converting to LED will move the needle on sustainability, and having a dimmable ballast and a network logic controller will allow us to do 2 things. One is monitor the streetlight inventory in real time, so we're not being reactive with complaints, which has an impact on public and transportation safety. And the other is the dimmable ballast will allow us to dim the lights when they're not needed so people can sleep well, because some of these LED lights tend to be a little brighter. We have worked with TECO to ensure that all LED lights meet AMA guidelines, which is a certain temperature, so that they're not too harsh. And then there are other possibilities with sensors, but we're not there yet. We've partnered with Waze and Waycare for a software. Now, again, I won't get too technical, but what this software does is, if you're familiar with Waze, it takes Waze data. It understands the roadway network in real time. It takes public data from our cameras and our traffic management sensors, and it verifies what it's seeing from crowdsourced data. And so this is a 2-way conversation from the person that leaves her garage to go to downtown, utilizes Waze. That data is being used by us for traffic management, and our verification of that data makes that platform better as well. And this is a classic 21st century business model, because the currency here is data and the value proposition is circular. Both private and public entities benefit from this, and this is one example of where, if we can engage with the private sector to define what we want to do, we'll probably get better outcomes. You've heard about the THEA Connected Vehicle Project, which uses radios in the infrastructure to talk to cars, pedestrians, transit. The same can be done over cellular as well. And there are 2 schools of thought. One is, radios installed by government. The other is cellular companies providing these same services. And we're agnostic to that. We want to make sure we're ready for both. So we have both of these projects going, the THEA CV pilot, but also a cellular based. And again, the purpose of these projects is primarily safety. And the goal is that if everyone in the transportation system is aware of what is going on, think of an intersection where a driver is making a right turn. Oftentimes, that driver is looking to the left for oncoming vehicles and may not know about pedestrians there or bicyclists there. And the same thing, if bicyclists and pedestrians were also aware, it moves the needle on safety. And we know this because RRFBs are similar devices. They bring awareness. And connected vehicle technologies or connected infrastructure technologies will do the same. We've partnered with HART on the AV service. Many of you know about this, but I won't dwell on that. Some key considerations I'd like to leave you all with. Let's consider connecting public and private realms. The rulemaking on this is not very clear, but I'll give you an example. Water Street hopes to be a well-certified district, which means their buildings will have all sorts of sensors. They will be smart buildings. They'll know what's going on in those buildings. Should there be a fire, God forbid, the building will know exactly where the fire is. If the building is connected to the public realm, the fire department will know exactly where the fire is on the way to responding to this event and may be able to mitigate the fire and save lives sooner than they do today. So that's just an example. Again, it's not very clear how we connect these, how the data works. It's going to require legal, technical, a lot of collaboration, but collaboration is key. The others are planning approach, and we mentioned this, that, let's revisit our 25-year planning or 20-year planning. The fastest growing mode of transportation in the US could not have been planned 3 years ago. So that's important, and the real-time data. And finally, let's fund operations more, not just system preservation on the side of capital, but day-to-day operations, because this will need new skills. This paradigm will require more hands-on collaboration. And finally, I'll leave with the limitations of technology, which kind of goes back to technology will improve safety. It will not improve congestion based on what we know today. This might change down the road, but it's going to require shared mobility and transit to solve congestion. So thank you all, and that's just a rah-rah slide for what we're doing in Tampa.
Are there any questions? Any questions? Mr. Green, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Vic. That's you covered a lot. Excuse me. Excuse me. You covered a lot of territory. Even though the smart cities umbrella is even bigger and getting much bigger all the time.
Absolutely.
But I want to go back to a couple of comments you made early on in your presentation about parking relative to the event situation, because there's something going on here I think everybody needs to understand. And that is the reduced demand for parking, given the ride-sharing aspects of how people choose to get there. Can you summarize that? And was that the first time the county actually sort of tracked that type of?
No, we work, all major special events at Raymond James Stadium and also the arena. So we typically know what's going on. We have annual meetings. So we engage with the TSA on this. But that's a good point. So, and it's not a clear point. It's a little complicated because parking demand is going down for things that are more entertainment oriented, not necessarily for our day-to-day items. For example, there's very recent disturbing data that car ownership in the biggest cities is going up. It's not going down. This is as rideshare is going up as well. So again, this data has not been parsed. This just came out like yesterday or day before. But they looked at, I think, Philly, Boston, New York, LA, and a few other cities. So in general, that's why I said we have to walk and chew gum. Now we have one more job, basically, on top of what we do. But long-term trends, if we move to a service-based model, what it will look like is our roads may be congested, but it will be congested with the same vehicles all the time circulating around. That will release parking space especially in our downtowns where real estate is really expensive, and by as much as 30% more space, or 30% of existing parking space will be available for redevelopment.
Commissioner Kemp?
Thank you very much for your presentation. Yeah, you got it. Thank you very much. Yesterday, the Hart Board approved security camera purchases to upgrade their security systems. And you made mention of, the data, how it's used, and the legal issues and sharing information as being a challenge. But I could see that as being a real opportunity to participate in what you're trying to see in the way of data, especially as we see buses have more and more buses, but we haven't yet necessarily redesigned the corridors for them to travel on. So I think that use of that data would be incredibly valuable for where we have an opportunity to redesign corridors, as I mentioned earlier, to improve transit's effectiveness. And with that in mind, also yesterday, Hart was presented with an excellent presentation from Jarrett Walker, who indicated that one of the most important things for not only the Hart Board, but also our efforts, is to look at what our outcome, to focus on the outcome before we really move into where the projects are. It sounds like what Smart Cities is doing is some of that, but I would recommend making it the biggest priority first before we try and test out every single little toy out there that's available, because we can achieve great things, and I appreciate what you're doing, so thank you very much.
Sure, thank you. And I'd like to address that because I didn't mention it, but as part of our ATMS project, one of the specifications is going to be to have a centralized system where our signal system can talk to CAD AVL systems of transit or public safety, so that we can do transit signal priority citywide rather than project by project as needed. So of course, there's a lot of engineering, a lot of planning that goes into that, but at least from a capability standpoint, we want to be ready to do that. So.
Mr. Mechanic, you recognize.
Yeah, you sort of alluded to this, but I just wanted to make this point and get your reaction. The ride sharing, whilst reducing parking, actually doubles the number of trips to a particular destination. So it's not just the existing congestion we have to deal with, it's the additional congestion. And I wanted to couple that with, from what I understand, Uber and Lyft are looking at their whole economic model, and they're not sure that what they're doing today is sustainable. So how is that all plugged into what you're looking at?
So the best I can say is the auto industry, Silicon Valley, rideshare companies, all are hoping that they're on the right track. The results are very mixed, and the best we can do as government agencies is stay engaged with these folks. That when we plan special events, make sure that Uber and Lyft are at the table. We're telling them about geofences, make sure they're notifying drivers, doing all that we can today. And then also plan for a potential of the disconnection of the human in the loop. I know that sounds scary, but that means prepare for automation, basically.
It's going to change again, the whole picture. Right?
Change is permanent and fast.
Any other? Mayor Dorado.
You mentioned, and I think you referred to it as Connect Point, the partnership with the Lighthouse for the Blind and kind of the smart paint on sidewalks. Is it an audio alarm that sounded if they go outside the boundaries?
It's haptic, it's vibratory, but it could be either, because the communication between the cane and, so it's actually, I'm sorry, it's both, because, and there it is. I don't know if you can see the picture, but it's an app with headphones. And one of the concerns that the Lighthouse for the Blind has put out there is, do you want them to actually have headphones on and an app connected when they depend so much on hearing? So we're starting with haptics only, but more importantly, our role in that is to facilitate the innovation and move it forward and listen to the experts. And the experts in this case are Intelligent Material, and Lighthouse for the Blind. And Ohio State University is doing the assessment and telling us, whether this is going.
And you said these test sidewalks are going to be in South County?
In South Tampa.
South
Sorry,
Tampa.
yeah. So specifically at Cleveland and Boulevard and Platte and Boulevard, because those are the nearest bus stops that a lot of persons with visual disabilities use to access the lighthouse.
Mr. Kemper, recommend.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting on so many levels. I think one of the things, and this kind of follows up in some ways, it's hard to touch exactly, but the parking, but also the congestion. And I think there's this dream that everyone has that somehow we'll have these, that human loop does sound scary, by the way, but automated vehicles that will somehow solve congestion. I've heard before, because vehicles only operate, 1 hour a day, but they all operate at the same hour. And we'll have twice as many trips and, we only have so much space, so much geometry. That was Jarrett Walker's point yesterday at Hart. So I see a huge mass transit future, one that involves not these what are today single occupancy vehicles that hold 3 or 4 people. Most people don't realize, as you pointed out, that the Uber and Lyft model, at least right now, Uber's $13 billion with a B dollars in debt and burning at $2 billion a year with venture capital because it's not really a sustainable model. But I see a huge role for transit and larger vehicles as the future, and what we have to do with frequency in that. And I just wondered if you could opine on that, address
Sure.
that for a minute.
Sure. So, and if we look historically, transit wasn't always a public service. Tico ran the streetcar and many other examples as well. And it may well happen, and this is related to the question earlier about Uber and Lyft and their future plans, it may well happen that they might find that having higher occupancy modes, going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 passengers, might work out better for their business because they're delivering a better product. Because today, rideshare during peak hours does create more congestion than before. So it's going to be a combination of factors, but one thing's for sure, our physics problem can only be solved with more people in a vehicle than there are today.
Or smaller vehicles, like bicycles
smaller
and
vehicle.
walking. And
Absolutely. And technology does help with congestion. And let's be clear, our congestion issues across the U.S. are about 4 to 5 hours a day. The rest of the time, that infrastructure is not taxed as much, but for maybe 3 or 4 cities. But for your typical Tampa, and there's over 100 Tampas out there, that's our challenge. So there may be other ways to manage this as well, but I'll leave that to the planning experts.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. We appreciate your presentation. Resilient Tampa Bay.
Morning, Allison Ye, MPO staff. I'm going to give you a briefing on a project that MPO started this summer. I'll try to be very succinct. The name of our project is Resilient Tampa Bay, and it's a resilience and durability extreme weather pilot program that we received funding from Federal Highway Administration. We started that this summer. It's a partnership between the 3 MPOs, so Pinellas, Pasco, and Hillsborough, comprising of the Tampa Bay TMA, and we're also partnered with the DOT and the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, who's doing a lot of our technical analysis, as well as we have a consultant engaged in this process. So I'm not going to read all these detailed slides, but I just want you to know that this is a project around the country with 11 pilots around different areas on each coast. One of the more interesting ones is the Naval Facilities Engineering, as they're going through and evaluating all the vulnerability of their bridges, which is kind of interesting. Mr. Vide mentioned earlier that we have a lot of people coming to Hillsborough County. That's true, but right now in Tampa Bay, we already have 2.8 million people, 1,000 miles of shoreline, the second largest population, and almost 60% of those people residing in some type of flood zone. So when we look at this is an opportunity as we update our LRTP for all 3 MPOs actually to incorporate a vulnerability analysis into our long-range plans. And we're also at the same time trying to talk to the hazard mitigation agencies and talk about sharing our data, incorporating that into their plans. We have some legislative mandates as to why we're doing this. So federal legislation says that we have to consider this in our long-range plan. We have to improve resiliency and reliability, and we have to look at stormwater mitigation. We have to consult with agencies and officials, so we're doing that because we have to. We're looking at flooding, so everything from inland flooding to storm surge to sea level rise together. From a community standpoint, we really want to look at this because this is important to our transportation system, not just the functionality, but for economic development, for quality of life. These challenges affect all of that. So real quick 10-second where we are. This summer fall we started collecting data. We've been doing analysis on the critical links, looking at the transportation model. And right now we're looking at that and engaging stakeholders. So we've been going to local mitigation strategy groups, MPO committees. We're using One Bay, the Regional Planning Council's group, as a vetting forum, and we're reaching out on a number of different fronts. So we've collected a lot of data, and what we hope is to do an economic analysis on that and then incorporate that into the long-range plan, and then there will also be a separate report. I'm not going to go through detailed analysis with you. I'm just going to give you a kind of very overview of some of the data that's been done so far. So we have a bunch of modeling scenarios. We're going to look at sea level rise, pair that with storm surge, pair that with, Mr. Bide mentioned the heavy precipitation events. We have a couple of precipitation scenarios, and then use the transportation model to look at that and then apply the economic analysis to it. That's with the help of the Regional Planning Council, who has expertise in that. So this is just some preliminary, some draft maps. Here's one that shows storm surge and sea level rise. The purple is the inundated land just from a Category 3 storm, and then it just goes inland from there. I'm sorry, I have bigger maps that I can show you if you're interested, that you can see better. But there's some rain scenarios. So there's a one-day rain scenario, 9 inches. I think the highest we've ever seen is almost 11.5 inches, and it could be down to 3 inches. So we're trying to pick one that's plausible, but a little more can give us a look at what the problems might be. And then there's kind of a Hurricane Harvey type scenario, 33 inches, 11 inches per day for 3 days nonstop. We also looked at some factors that we might want to consider, what's a critical transportation facilities. So evacuation routes are important, what the average daily traffic is in that area, the average density in their area, and finally, the average number of zero-car households. I think everything we do in the MPO, we're worried about vulnerable population. This is a factor that can give us a clue as to where the vulnerable populations might be residing. So that's all the quantitative analysis, and there's actually more quantitative analysis. But what we've tried to emphasize, I think in everything the MPO does, but in Federal Highway really pushes this on us too, is you have to vet the data, ground truth the data with stakeholder involvement. So we've been going out for a few months now and talking to people. We had a survey out to professionals in the field, so county officials, city officials, economic development folks, and there was a 3-question survey. I just wanted to run through this real quick. So we asked them, what factors should determine criticality in a transportation asset? And if you go from left to right, you'll see evacuation route is the top one that they named, and then followed by what the traffic volume is on a corridor and what the proximity is to major economic and social activity centers. Then it goes from there to transit, adopt, land use plans. Those all kind of meld together, but evacuation routes came out on top as well as the projected traffic and economic centers. So the second question was, what factors should determine criticality in a geographic area? And population density seemed to come out as one of the most important factors, along with employment. And then the percentage of zero-car households in equity areas. It's not surprising, but it's good to, like I said, vet and ground truth the data you're looking at. Finally, we asked them what facilities and activity centers or destinations you find critical from access provision. So hospitals and trauma centers, not surprising, came up on top. Shelters, power plants, and then down from there, tourist destinations, educational institutions, military locations, community centers. Some of these overlap, shelters and community centers might overlap. The type of representation we got when we did this particular survey, it actually went to hundreds of people, but we got a lot of responses from county officials and public works officials and city officials and we were economic development agencies and regional organizations. So all that I told you about kind of coalesced into this map where we took all those factors plus the quantitative analysis and came up with a critical facilities map that shows what happens if a Category 3 storm hits, what happens if that's paired with the high level of sea level rise, and then we're also going to refine our precipitation map and add that to it. So we start to see, you know, a high, low, high, medium, low of where the critical roads are, and that helps us to work our analysis. There's a lot more data behind this, but that will come out in the final report. So that's where we are right now. The hope is we take this analysis and we look at adaptation analysis, both from a system-wide standpoint and also to have a menu of options. We're going to, in each county, we're going to have 2 representative projects. They're not the most priority projects, but they're ones that can help us understand how to look at mitigation. So we'll look at physical, you know, gray infrastructure improvements, natural green infrastructure improvements, and look at water management. This is the framework we've been working for in this grant. Is Federal Highway has a climate change and extreme weather assessment framework, and we've been kind of working through this in our analysis, and we're at the end where the goal is implementation. So from a planning standpoint, that's to implement into the long-range plan, into hazard mitigation plans. Next few months, we're finishing the modeling, the economic analysis, adaptation strategies, and there's ongoing coordination after that, trying to make the data useful to anyone who would have it. So, and that's my briefing. I'm happy to give you more detail or answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
Yeah.
Any questions? Mr. Green, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Allison, great report on the status of this grant. But where do you see this all leading to at the federal level? I mean, are they actually looking to develop some standards nationally to distribute to local MPOs, transportation agencies? I mean, is that what all this is feeding into?
Yes. Actually, we're already participating in a national guidebook that should come out in 2 months based on our first grant for just Hillsborough County, the vulnerability assessment. They are using us as test cases because they, you know, have federal level mandates and things they want to do, but they haven't really been able to implement them at the ground level. When we go to the national peer exchanges, what we hear is that Hillsborough County is actually a little ahead of the game in trying to incorporate this into our plans. And so, yeah, definitely going into national guidance. There's some online already. Yeah.
Well, we were chuckling here a moment ago. One of the maps, I guess the last map you showed was the sort of the Heaven Help Us All map. But
no, actually, it's not. It's just sort of a somewhat likely scenario.
Right. But good report though. Thank you.
So this is not the final report. We are continuing to coordinate. We're working pretty closely with the county and the department, trying to just keep everyone in the loop. So happy to add anyone to our group you feel is appropriate. Yeah.
None? Commissioner Overman, you recognized.
Thank you. Allison, could you go back to the stakeholders grid or pie chart?
Yep.
Okay, so this is a study of the responses of the agencies rather than the public?
So this,
I mean, the public doesn't appear to be a stakeholder.
Right, I was looking at this, and this is a little misleading because it went out to several hundred people, including stakeholders. So the One Bay Resilient Communities Group actually has the public, different organizations, but in the survey, they didn't ask everyone to check who they belong to, and most of what we got checked were officials who are willing to disclose their affiliation. So I think this makes it look like the only people that answer were county public works and regional organizations, but there were stakeholders in there. We actually have a working CAC group, a subgroup of the, we asked the CAC of each MPO if they could send a representative, then give us referrals from there. We've had kind of, it's hard for people to make it to every meeting, so we're trying to keep them in the loop, but we have representation. So anytime someone wants to participate, we allow them to, and we invite them to, but we just haven't, I think that graph probably doesn't show all the people, doesn't represent properly the citizens that are in there.
Right, and that was my concern in the
Yeah.
presentation.
Right.
If that's what's getting back as a result, we want to make sure that we fairly represent that
Right.
the public is being asked. But the results of the surveys also seem to reflect that our disadvantaged community wasn't really at the table. Our economically vulnerable, other than the one where you talked about those that had no vehicle at all. Where, community centers are a core part of a lot of vulnerable communities, but it's last on the list in terms of providing.
It's actually much longer list than this
Okay, all right,
graph
I
here,
would just,
but-
my first blush
yeah,
was,
yeah.
are the public here and are economically challenged communities or vulnerable communities being represented here, and I think that's an important.
I think you're right. One of the things we've been trying to do is take this information to there's a regional transportation disadvantage group, and then there's a transportation disadvantage groups from each MPO that they run. So we've been trying to go to that, along with, when we go to emergency management, they also have staff that work specifically on that. Now, I just wanted to point out, in the critical facilities map that just looked at critical facilities, that's exactly why we added the average percentage of zero-car households, so to make sure that at least the quantitative analysis included that. And so when we went and talked to our other pilot peers, they actually had not thought about doing that yet, so it was actually something they thought was a good idea. I think there's always room for improvement, so I'm,
It's an
glad you brought
excellent,
that up.
thank you
Yeah.
for your work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Ms. Alden, MPO bylaws amendment.
Thank you, sir. And board members, we have just 2 housekeeping amendments that we would propose for the bylaws and bring back for your consent agenda next month if there are no objections. So the first is, as you know, our host agency for staffing purposes is the Planning Commission. And in a routine review of the Planning Commission's policies regarding harassment a couple of months ago, it was noted that although we have pretty clear harassment policies for staff, there aren't any policies that apply to the conduct of the volunteer members of the MPO's advisory committees. Rather than wait for that to become an issue, we coordinated with council and who suggested that we add a reference in the MPO bylaws to there being appropriate standards of conduct. And we would cite the Florida Senate Administrative Policies and Procedures as establishing those standards of conduct. The Florida Senate policies and procedures are pretty clear. They are in your agenda packet for reference if you have any questions about what that would entail. So the other housekeeping amendment is one specifically for the Transportation Disadvantaged Coordinating Board, and that is to add another seat on that board as a result of a change to Florida Administrative Code. And so the additional seat would be for a representative of the Agency for Persons with Disabilities. So there is a proposed markup of the bylaws in your agenda packet, and if there are no questions or objections, we'll bring that back next month on your consent agenda.
Any questions, any objections? Seeing none. Executive Director's report.
Thank you. And a couple of items are listed on your agenda. A week from today, we have an evening special workshop which will focus on the study that TBARTA has been administering on behalf of the 3 MPOs in the Tampa Bay Transportation Management area to look at how to strengthen regional planning and prioritization among the 3 MPOs specifically. And it does look at the potential for merging the 3 MPOs. So that consulting team has come back with a draft report. It is available on the TBARTA website. And the purpose of our meeting next week will be to hear from the consultant and be able to have dialogue with the consultant. We're also inviting members of the MPO advisory committees and the public to participate in that discussion. The meeting is, we couldn't find a perfect date, unfortunately, since this is coordinated with the other two MPOs as well, and the consultant was only available in this particular window. So I know that a couple of you aren't going to be able to make it, and I've scheduled individual briefings for the couple of folks who have let me know that they can't make it. If anybody else would like that courtesy, I can certainly try to coordinate that for you. But I do expect this to be an interesting discussion next Tuesday night. It will be in this room, and we'll be sending out an agenda and a link to the report later today. Item B is an additional special meeting that will be the beginning of the report from the Department of Transportation responding to this board's motions about Tampa Bay Next, the downtown interchange, the express toll lanes along I-275, at our Transportation Improvement Program public hearings in 2016 and 2017, this board had a long list of questions for the Department of Transportation and impacts that we requested to be looked at. And it has taken a couple of years for the department to go through that analysis process. And so as they are starting to come back with more detailed results, they'd like to have time to be able to show those results in more detail and answer any questions that anyone might have. So we're scheduling 2 or 3 of these open house events during the next few months. The first one will be January the 31st. It'll be 4 to 6 p.m. It'll again be in this room. It will be open house format, so stop by any time. We will also bring those displays from the open house back through all of the MPO advisory committees and to the MPO board. So in case you can't make it to the meeting, you'll have an opportunity to at least see what was put on display. We have tentatively slated 2 other dates in March and April that we'll let you know about once those are confirmed. That will all lead up to the department's supplemental environmental impact statement, public workshop, which will be later this spring. After that workshop, they will send a recommended option to Federal Highway for approval. So this is all leading up to that action. Any questions about those 2 things?
Yes. Thank you. The workshop on January 15th, 5 p.m. here. And what will you and I discussed the format. Did you come up with anything final, how this is going to be laid out and how it will work for the public input?
So we're looking at honestly just a very simple kind of meeting format where there'll be a presentation to the board from the consultant. There will be 45 minutes set aside for members of the public or the MPO committees to speak to the board. We'll also have opportunities for written comments since it is a limited period of time. And then we'll have another 45 minutes set aside for board member discussion. This is not going to be advertised for action. It's just to enable deeper understanding of how the consultant came up with their recommendations and have a dialogue about what it means for our community. I would suggest that if there is an interest in a board action of some kind, that come back to the policy committee at our meeting at the end of January to consider an action and make a recommendation to the board.
If I can follow up with, so the board will be sitting here, the public will be sitting there, we'll have a presentation to begin with?
From the
and-
consultant.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So just to wrap up, I do have one more announcement, and that is that the Vision Zero Coalition has a couple of events coming up. One is this Saturday, which will be a painting of a street mural outside of Cleveland Elementary School. Cleveland is close to I-275 and Sly. The address is 723 East Hamilton, and that will start at 10 a.m. We'd love to have anybody who would like to come out and participate in that event. The Vision Zero Coalition will also be marching in the Martin Luther King Day Parade. And any questions, please get in touch with Gina Torres of our staff. If you were not able to participate in the roadway paintings this past year, this would be a great time to do that. There's a great photograph in our calendar, which we've just published and distributed. There's some great stories and highlights from this past year about what you all have been able to achieve, what your organizations have been able to achieve for this community as a whole. And so look forward to another great year ahead. Our next meeting will be February the 5th in this room at 9 a.m.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
Just one fast comment. Just when we do evening meetings, I just noticed that it's 5 p.m., which, I mean, we do evening meetings to get the public, and I just think it's a harder time for the public to come than if we did it at 6.
Have you noticed that meeting?
Not the formal one. We can, let me check and see if we can move it to 6.
That would, I think, be better for people.
I agree.
If it's not noticed.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any old business, any new business, any monkey business? We adjourn.